And I'd never been to Ireland prior to the day I stepped off the plane when I moved there, which was kind of a fun little adventure. Sometimes I've had to do the thing where I'm like, don't tell certain people that I'm there visiting, just so I don't have to then make a bunch of time to visit people. And then I'll get asked to be like, oh, are you going to see so-and-so on this trip? And I'm like, no, because, if you have that opportunity, absolutely do it. And this is what I tell people. Maybe you move and you realize you don't like it. Well, that's fine. Give it however much amount of time, a year, I say, and then move back. Because I did that thing when you go somewhere where you haven't been in a long time and you're like, oh, that's changed. Oh, that's new. This used to be a big field of nothing and now it's an apartment complex block, like that kind of thing.
I just call it, Milo, I do that a lot, and I just call it being old.
Mm.
Milo, hi, and welcome to Whereabouts Tales.
Thanks for having me.
Today we have Milo. Milo is the host from 80s and 90s Overlooked, and we prepared together an episode on that topic as well because we come from completely different cultures. But I think we can share a bit more about that at the end, Milo.
Yep.
What the story of that episode would be. But today, I would say, beside the fact that Milo is the host of 80s and 90s Overlooked, Milo is also an expat living in Ireland since more than 10 years, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I moved to Ireland in June of 2013, June or July of 2013, so the summer of 2013. I lived there for 7 years, and then I moved to the UK 5 years ago in the fall of 2019. So I've been in the UK ever since. So basically been living outside of the US since 2013.
Okay, so you have 2 years more than me. I moved to 15 outside of my home country.
Do you go back pretty regularly? Because it's pretty easy for you to get to Romania, right?
I do. Not so often as I would like to because of work and stuff, and usually, I hope my family in Romania will not get upset, but usually visiting family is not holiday.
I agree. Like, people ask me, they're like, do you go visit your family? And I'm like, no, I know my family. What do I need to go visit them? I know what they're like. I want to go somewhere new and exciting. Yeah.
I know that this one thing, but second thing, the thing is that you visit a lot of people. You are always switching from house to house, and at the end, after a week of moving from house to house and visiting X and Y, and don't get me wrong, I'm happy to see them all, but I'm so exhausted.
Yeah. Sometimes I've had to do the thing where I'm like, don't tell certain people that I'm there visiting, just so I don't have to then make a bunch of time to visit people. And then I'll get asked to be like, oh, are you going to see so-and-so on this trip? And I'm like, no, because, don't post anything online about me being here.
Milo, this is something that only an expat can understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Trust me.
Yeah.
Because if you tell everyone else, they say, no, but it makes no sense. Dude, trust me. It makes sense.
Yeah. Everyone who lives overseas has this experience.
Absolutely. But the advantage that we have is that, for example, if I go there usually during the summer, we go there for a longer period, like a week or 2 weeks, and then we can drive because I would say it's a 1-day drive. If we talk about US distances, it's not so far away.
Yeah.
I did talk to someone from Colorado, and she said, yeah, like Quebec is like, no, it's not far away, like 8 hours drive.
From Colorado to Quebec, Canada.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a straight drive, though, like no stops, I would imagine.
Yeah, most probably.
Yeah.
But she said, it's like we go every once in a while for concerts there and stuff. I'm just like,
what?
Okay.
There's no way I would do that drive for a concert.
I mean, you have to love the band. It
I
must
guess.
be an 80 or 90 band.
It must be on their final tour, too. It's like, that's it. This is our last show, so you better come.
Milo, or the roots, let's say it like this.
Washington State. So I'm originally from Washington State. Yep.
Okay. born and raised in the same city, schooled in the same city?
Yeah, more or less. I was born in Spokane, Washington, which is the east side of the state. And then in my early 20s, I moved over to Seattle, Washington, and then
Mm-hmm.
was there before moving. So I consider Seattle my home, even though I wasn't born there, but I associate more with Seattle, like the lifestyle and the people and that kind of stuff.
Was it when you moved from your hometown? I'm sorry, I haven't heard about your hometown at
That's
all.
that's understandable.
Is it you had the feeling that you moved from a small community to a big city where
So Spokane isn't necessarily that small of a city in comparison to some. It's really just it's Washington State has the mountains that run through it from north to south.
hmm
And on the west side of the state, it's kind of the liberal side of the state, and the right side of the state is the conservative side of the state.
Okay.
So there's that kind of a divide there. But also to me, Spokane, it's just not really, it just wasn't really for me. Like just the people and the lifestyle. And there's nothing against it. Like it's just the kind of people that I like to associate with. And I'm really into like theater and stuff. I studied theater. I don't know. I just like Seattle better. There's nothing against Spokane. It's just not for me. Like a good friend of mine moved from Spokane to Seattle around the same time I did. And she stayed in Seattle for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years. So not too long, but then moved back to Spokane because it was the right lifestyle for her. And so,
hmm
uh, it's just kind of whatever works for you. That's really what it comes down to. So I don't want people to think I'm knocking on Spokane because, I occasionally you make fun of it, but it's just like,
I don't want people to think that
no,
I
no, no.
make fun of it. But I do.
Yeah. Well, I call it Spokanistan sometimes, like Afghanistan and Spokane. So if I refer to it as Spokanistan.
Uh, should I ask if you go often there back? But I
Not
don't
too
think
often
so.
anymore. Not a lot of my family lives there anymore. They've either died off or moved elsewhere. And
hmm
so it's much more rare that I go to Spokane these days. But yeah, I go. I actually was just there not too long ago, a few weeks ago, over
hmm
visiting. Yeah, so I go. It
How
was
was
it's funny because like I go so long without visiting. The last time I was there, when we were there a few weeks ago, my wife probably hated me by the end of the trip because I did that thing when you go somewhere where you haven't been in a long time and you're like, oh, that's changed. Oh, that's new. This used to be a big field of nothing and now it's an apartment complex block, like that kind of thing. Or that's the house I used to live in. Check it out. And I'm sure she was like, yeah, dude, whatever. Can we just get to where we're going?
uh, I just call it Milo. I do that a lot,
Mm,
and I just call it being old.
mm, that's it. Yep.
It's so sad. It's so sad when you realize you do it like what your parents did. It's
Yeah.
so sad, but it is.
You turn into them at some point.
Exactly. Um, um, I know it's a far-fetched question, but how was it growing up in the 80s and 90s in the US?
Yes. So for us, the 80s and 90s were very, I guess the US in general is always the US in general has always been a very consumerist country and society. And the 80s were huge in that. So as a child, you had Saturday morning cartoons. These were the thing back then. It's not really a
hmm
thing anymore, but everybody loved their Saturday morning cartoons. You get up, you got your cartoons you watch, you fight for the TV because you only had the one TV. And most of your cartoons had an associated toy line. So if I was watching my G.I. Joe cartoon, I wanted to go to the Toys R Us store and buy G.I. Joes or He-Man cartoon and the He-Man toys. So they all had these tie-ins in order to get you to buy toys. That's really the main reason they had the cartoons. And it was just kind of a loophole in certain laws where apparently could be kind of considered educational or directed towards children, that kind of stuff. But then Ronald Reagan kind of got rid of all that, and then they deregulated it, and now who knows what they do on Saturday mornings? I don't know.
They
But
they are selling they are saying Tesla directly from the White House. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But so for me, that was the big one is just all this like media
Mm-hmm.
being shot at you, movies, television. You'd sit at home and watch TV. Like with my parents, they were kind of sometimes there and sometimes not. They were very random with their parenting. And so I always joke I was raised by television. Most everything I know and decisions I've made have because I've decided somebody on TV was the person teaching me this valuable lesson. And that's where I get all my information from. So I think that's the big one from the US in the 80s and 90s is just that media aspect of our lifestyles. Yeah.
I realize more and more than that our episode that we talk about is going to be really interesting because I had so many questions now, but I just hold them back. I just I just hold them back. I I want to say you said something which is extremely important. You just said like that, but I think it's extremely important. We had only one TV.
Yeah. Exactly. Nobody had their phones and their laptops and their tablets. If you
And
were the
when the cartoons were starting, there was no fly moving in the house.
no, yeah. Was it the same with you guys then? Wait, I'm curious. So Romania in the 80s would have been communist. And
Yes.
so what did you guys view for entertainment?
Um,
Did you have a color
read,
TV or was it just
read,
in my head
read,
I picture
read,
sorry guys like I pictured
read books.
yeah.
So first of all, there was no power.
Yeah.
You had a limited. I'm sorry. Say first the picture in your head. It's important.
Okay.
It's important.
All right. Well, because my picture in my head is like everything's gray and dreary. All the houses are gray and kind of block houses. I picture like a TV, but it's black and white TV. Like there's, I don't know why, but there's like no color in Romania in the 80s.
So the thing is that color so color television they had, but color TVs you had like in the communist leaders' houses or someone that had to do with the political police or something like this. So there's not so often happening. When someone was having a color TV was an event, but even if you had it, it was useless because first of all the power was stopped almost every evening, and there were 2 hours of TV program every day.
Oh, wow.
And from the 2 hours, one and a half was the big accomplishments of the Communist Party. And lucrative, there was an expression that I think that it doesn't exist in any other language. They were using our leader had a working visit. That makes no sense, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It's either a visit, either working, but you cannot say a working visit. Like
Okay.
you can't. Yeah. And most of the people are doing reading
Okay.
and obtaining books to read was a challenge because a lot of it were censored by the censorship. So a lot of books that you know from those times were censored, and when you got the book was a huge event, and you usually share it and like you read it and you gave it, and then it went into a circle. I know my father had a circle of everyone who could organize a book, they were sharing the books among each other because that was the only thing that you had. And most important thing, this is gonna be an amazing episode. The one we usually discuss. Everyone had to have in their house candles
Oh, for the power.
or light because you had to read.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's funny because like in the US, you might get a power outage because the weather or power lines go down. And of course you dig out candles and flashlights. But it was kind of a fun event as a child for us because it was like, ooh, the power's out and it's exciting and something new and different. And, let's play games or whatever,
So
So
when it's happening
yeah,
every once in a while, it's extremely funny.
yeah.
when, when it's happening every day, it's not funny anymore.
That's what I imagine. Like every day, you're like, all right, power's out.
There was a huge. It was not only power. It was water. It was basically all the utilities with which they could save money.
Hmm.
They were stopping during the night the power because the factories were taking the most amount of power in the night and complicated things. But there was a huge writing on a wall in Bucharest. I will try to search for the picture by the next time. Because you had no water. You had water like 4-5 hours 2 hours in the morning and 4-5 hours in the evening. Like running water. And there was a big text written, is there water? Is there hot water? Because you were in the big cities, you had these big heating systems where they were distributing hot water into the apartment. So there was not in the independent heating in every apartment. They were centralized. And the hot water was coming from this big central station that was distributing the hot water. And there was a big text written, is the hot water there? And below, yes, it's there, but it's cold.
All right.
We developed humor in a way in which I think no nation that went through this developed. The way in which they had to hide the jokes in I don't know, when you go to a theater play, when you go to I don't know, to a concert, they had to hide in every possible way so that they passed the censorship. We developed a kind of humor that I don't think that any other. I'm subjective, of course,
Oh, I'm sure
but I
you
don't
had
think.
to have. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we went on the rabbit hole.
All
Um,
right.
I wanted to ask you about the shows. I do remember one show, of course, much later, so after the revolution, but I don't know when it was recording. Do you know Life with Louis?
Life with Louie. I don't think so. This was a US show?
Yes. It was made by the comedian Louis Anderson.
Oh yeah, I remember Louis Anderson. Oh yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
funny guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved Life with Louis. I loved it. It was one of my English sources back then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then after some years, they dub it as well in Romanian, and they did a really good job. But the original show, the original language, Andy, Louis' father, an amazing character. Do you know it? Or you only know Louis Anderson?
No, I know. Well, I know the show now because I just did a quick look when you were
Okay.
telling. So I do remember that show, but I don't. I don't think I watched it very often. Like I don't know if it was just the times that it was on, or like other stuff that I was going. Because at that point, because it says it was in '94,
Mm-hmm.
so I would have been a teenager around then, and so I was probably doing teenage stuff, like hitting on girls and whatever other stuff
When you
teenagers
had no
do.
cartoons when you were a kid, you don't care if you're a teenager or not. You just
Yeah.
watch cartoons.
Yeah. You just enjoy them when you finally get them. Yeah. I
Absolutely.
understand that. Absolutely.
But yeah, to come back to the question, what was the show that you remember? What was your favorite show, if you can name one?
As a child, it probably would have been something like, I really liked Voltron. There was a
Mm-hmm.
Voltron cartoon or, Transformers. Those probably would have been my two favorite ones back then because you had the robots doing their like transforming thing, and they both kind of the similar in a lot of ways, right? So Transformers had your Autobots and Decepticons fighting each other and cartoon animated shooting, yet somehow nobody ever dies when they get shot. And same with Voltron, where they could do the lions and form the Voltron robot thing. And they're all very repetitive when you actually look at the episodes now. But those probably would have been my two favorite ones back then.
Do you remember also movies that you were allowed to see? Or there was no PJ back then. Like there was no.
Yeah. So Indiana Jones, of course. That's probably, I think the first movie I ever remember going to is E.T. And funny enough, I've never seen that film since. So I probably could not tell you what happens in most of it other than clips that I've seen from the film since then. But I remember being a little kid and we went and saw E.T. as a little kid. And yeah, so that would have been one, but Indiana Jones definitely, or Back to the Future probably would have been the two that I really was excited about, or Ghostbusters, those ones. Uh,
Back to the Future, a
yeah,
classic.
like I mean, Michael J. Fox is kind of my idol, was my idol back then. So there was a show called Family Ties. That was his show that he initially kind of became famous on. And his character, Alex P. Keaton, see, I remember his character's name. And he was like this kind of businessy guy. He always wore a suit and he wanted to make money. And I'm just like, I totally wanted to be him when I grew up. I'm like, I want to be like that. And yeah, so that was probably one television wise. And then, yeah,
I
and then Back
think
to
I
the Future.
know Family Ties. I actually seen it as well. I don't know. I don't remember if I seen it back then or now, but I know the show.
Yeah, I don't think you hear too much about it now. But I thought that was a great show. Went on for a long time. It was a good family show too because you could watch it with your family. It was one of those shows where like if your parents would actually home, and you could watch a show in front of them. When they weren't home, I would watch stuff like Magnum PI because Magnum's running around and driving fast cars and shooting stuff. So that would be the kind of stuff I watched when the parents weren't around.
Have you had back then in the US the um rating of shows?
No,
Like,
it wasn't really a thing. They kind of had, it was based more on the times because it was all just network TV. I mean, you had cable, I guess, but that wasn't as big. And so it would usually go up till about 9 p.m. So up until about 9 would be more family friendly stuff. So like say 8 o'clock would be something like The Cosby Show
mhm,
or Family Ties or any of those. And then they'd be like sitcoms usually. And then there'd be another sitcom at 8:30. And then hit 9 o'clock, it would start going to like an older shows, and that's where you'd see things like Cheers, which takes place in a
mhm,
bar, or the Magna
mhm,
PIs, or that kind of stuff. So that was kind of that cutoff where I guess they just
mhm,
assumed all children were sent to bed before 9 p.m. And then it was adults' time to watch TV.
mhm. Interesting. I thought about that because I didn't think as well there was always this parental protection, but I think it makes sense. I mean, 8, 9 it's an okay time to say okay, until 9 we watch family things, and after that we switch to the grown up ones.
Yep.
Milo, then you moved to Seattle, lived there for a while. How did you come to the idea to move outside of the US? What made you interested in the world outside of the US?
I've always loved traveling around and seeing new places. I never really had the chance to back then, but it was really just a desire to live somewhere else, see new things, and meet new people. So I was working at Microsoft at the time, and the team that I was on at Microsoft had an office in Seattle, or Redmond technically, and they have an office in Dublin, Ireland, and the team in Ireland was expanding. And so I literally just saw that they were looking to expand the team and bring on new people. And I contacted the manager of that team and was like, hey, can I apply for one of the positions there? And she was like, yeah. So I talked to her, talked to my manager, and then basically just transferred from Microsoft in the US to Microsoft Ireland, doing the same job on a different team there. And I'd never been to Ireland prior to the day I stepped off the plane when I moved there, which was kind of a fun little adventure. And yeah, it was great. I ended up staying for 7 years. Here, my thing was, I kind of had this attitude of like, look, I'll move and I'll give it a year. If I just absolutely hate it, then I'll move back, right? Because I kind of had to commit to at least a year because Microsoft paid for my move and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'll give it the year. If I hate it, I'll move back. If I don't, then maybe I'll stay a bit longer. The downside was that thinking that I still had my my house in the U.S., I had a condo, which I was renting out to friends while I was away, which one is never rent to your friends because, friends suck. And two, all my stuff was still there, right? And so I had to then move it into storage because I'm like, okay, well, a year's up. I'm not moving back. So now what do I do with this stuff? So I moved it into storage thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll be here another year or two, right? No. So I spent money on a storage unit for years because I was like, oh, I'm moving back. I'm going to move back, and then never did. And so if anyone listening is thinking about moving to another country, either take your stuff with you or sell it. Do not put it into storage.
And do not rent it to friends.
And do not
Never.
rent to friends. Exactly.
I have a good friend of mine who's saying, if you don't want to have friends, borrow the money.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. Like
because the same.
Yeah. I still keep in touch with a couple of the guys because it was a 3-bedroom place. So I rented the 3 rooms to friends, and I still talk to 2 of them, but not one of them.
And it has nothing to do with the apartment.
Oddly enough, not really that much, but I was kind of a bit pissed because they did kind of trash the place when they moved out, which really pissed me off because they didn't necessarily trash it, but they didn't clean up after themselves.
About it.
Yeah, exactly.
And they didn't care
they
about
didn't care,
it.
exactly. You're renting, so you don't care that much. Yeah. So, yeah.
And how was the so first of all, Microsoft, nice, I must say. How was the arrival experience in Dublin for you? So you said you've never been to Ireland. You haven't even tried to do a small visit to see what's about on how the city is about. How's the landing experience?
It was fine. Plane landed down. We didn't crash. So it was all good.
Did you...
Sorry, go ahead.
You go, please.
Yeah. So it was nice, like I said, because they helped sponsor the move. So they have a lot. I mean, it's a big international company. So they've got people that do this kind of stuff all the time. So they had somebody waiting at the airport to pick me. And I think there was another guy that was being picked up at the same time. They put me up in a temporary housing for first couple months there, 3 months, I think. So dropped me off at the temporary housing. They had another person that took me around and helped me set up a bank account, took me to the immigration office, kind of walked me through all of that kind of stuff. So it was really hand-holding that experience, which was fantastic because if it weren't for that, then yeah, you got to figure it all out yourself, figure out how to get around, transportation, immigration offices. Anyone who's ever been to an immigration office in any country knows that it's frustrating and time consuming and a total pain in the butt. So, yeah, so it was really, for me, it was really nice because they took care of all of that.
You didn't want to the actual real expat experience, I must say, because doing the bank account opening, immigration office, and so on, that's an experience by itself. Independing on which country, but my first curiosity, Milo, is: have you thought that they are not speaking English? Actually, they are speaking a different language.
In Ireland, no, I knew they spoke. English.
No. I did. So I phrased the question wrong. But it was a nice one. I phrased the question wrong. I mean, when you first heard them talking, didn't you have the feeling that they speak another language which is actually not English because you're not able to understand it?
Not really. Most people I know, they're very easy to understand. You do get some thick Irish accents. A friend of mine that I was friends with there, he had a very thick Irish accent. And there would be numerous times that him and I would be having a conversation, and I would literally say, I have no idea what you just said. So there is that one, but it's pretty rare. For the most part, it wasn't an issue. No.
I also, through my work, I've been a lot in Dublin and in Belfast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Belfast has a thicker accent. Yeah.
And I said this story again, but I love it. A work colleague of mine, born in Belfast, worked for 10 years in Scotland, came back to Belfast. My friend, that's an accent.
Yeah.
That's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I think the first 2 hours of talking to him was struggling to make some connections between the words that I was able to understand so that I can figure it out what he was trying to say.
There is an aspect of like when you're hearing the accent regularly, you get used to it and you can figure it out. But it's a fun change when you're talking to people with different accents. After I moved there, I decided to take a trip up to Belfast because I wanted to visit it. And my last night in Belfast, I went down to just the pub or whatever and to get some food and have a drink. And I started chatting with these two guys there. They were both Scottish and stuff. And so they're like, yeah, and their accents are thick, but I can totally understand everything, right? So then the three of us decided to kind of go on a bit of a pub crawl throughout the rest of the night. So we go to another pub and we're talking to some girls at one point, and then we're all drinking throughout the night. And by the end of the night, I couldn't understand anything they were saying because their accents just got thicker and thicker and thicker the more they drank. And then, of course, the drunker I get, the less filtering I have, or focus to filter and stuff. So by the end of the night, I was just like, I don't know what these guys are saying, but I'm having a good time. So, all right.
Absolutely. That's the most important.
Exactly.
I do remember a pub in Belfast which was called Filthy McNasty.
Nice name.
So whomever is in Belfast, that's an absolute recommendation. An amazing place.
All right.
The friendliness of the Irish people was something that surprised me in my experience in Ireland. Was it the same for you?
Yes. It's so surprising how friendly people are. Like you'd go up to the bar in a pub, right? And you're just ordering a drink and you're waiting for the bartender to bring a drink. And there might be some guy sitting there and he'll just start talking to you. And he's like, oh, where are you from? Da, 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 chatting and chatting and chatting. It's so Irish. A couple friends of mine were over here visiting in London a couple weeks ago. And we went out to a couple little bars, and my buddy was the same way. He would start talking to like every person near us at any point in time throughout the night. And it's like, dude, you're so Irish. Yeah, it's funny. So very friendly. Yeah, that stereotype about friendly Irish people is so true.
I don't know if it has to do if it has something to do with the alcohol.
Maybe.
I will never know.
Yep.
But they are the warmness with which they receive you whenever you enter a store. I don't know, any services that you try to get. It was a big surprise for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were I don't think that you have so many cultural differences between Ireland and US, but still I think you have some.
A few. The interesting thing about cultural differences is I find that they're more the same than different. But yes, certainly, I think the Irish are very proud of being Irish. Like it's definitely a pride thing, and I think because of the history they've had with the English and all that kind of stuff. So if you're like chatting with somebody and you start knocking on the Irish, that's when they'll like switch from that super friendly Irish person to let's get into a brawl Irish person. Like so that I think that's definitely one. To whereas in the US, we argue with each other in the US all the time, especially about politics, right? But we're so used to it that for me, if somebody talks crap about the US, I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, go. It doesn't offend me. To whereas, like, I think that's one big cultural difference between the Irish and the Americans is the pride that they have in their country, and they're obviously very proud Americans. You see them on the news waving their flags and acting like lunatics, but for the most part, Americans aren't like that. Where we can take it when people point out flaws in our country.
I mean, it's a sensitive topic at the moment. Let's be honest. I think we are living in a really, I don't know, angered. I don't know. I don't know what's the right term. I really don't know what's the right term. But we are living in a world where we hate each other so easy, and this is something which is kind of painful. I think Irish are only getting defensive when you somehow get into their pride, like in their culture, and you criticize something from their culture.
Exactly.
Um,
It's funny because living in the UK and Ireland, how often you hear Irish people make fun of the British and how often you hear British make fun of the Irish. So it goes back centuries, that bit of like love-hate relationship they have, because they're economy wise, they're very intertwined. But socially, it's funny to listen to like each the people kind of knock on each other every once in a while. But yeah,
there was
and
a huge
yeah,
discussion because you know one of the big part of the Irish history was the war. I would just call it the war, the fights between the North and the island. Um, and there were big discussions during the Brexit. How will they handle the border if there will be a border, and if nobody wanted to have a border again because it would just open the door again for fighting and aggressivity and so on. And until now, they managed to do it without the border.
yeah, it's nice they were able to resolve that, because you talk to people that were alive during the troubles, and it's tough that nobody wanted to go back to that.
Exactly, exactly. Um, Milo, why UK after Ireland?
So after 7 years in Ireland, I was just getting restless and just kind of wanted to see what else is out there. You know, we only live once, right? And by then I was with my wife, and we were just looking for options of places where we could go. And she works for Facebook, or Meta as they like to be known now. And the team that she worked with has an office in Dublin. So kind of the same thing. We were like, well, where can we go? And so they sponsored our move to the UK, which was easier then because it was just before Brexit. And now it would be harder. They didn't pay for everything the way Microsoft did. So if anyone's listening, Microsoft is better than Facebook. And we had to like pay for it ourselves and do all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it was really just came down to the options where she could go. It was London, or I think Berlin. They had an office in Berlin. And neither of us wanted to live in Berlin at the time. She's German, so she could have spoken the language and I would have had to learn it. But we already had some friends that lived in London. And so we knew people moving here. Culturally, again, it's very similar. And so we decided to come to London.
So your wife from Germany and you from US met in Dublin.
Yeah.
That's I mean, even if I say the sentence, it's a hell of a story.
Yeah. Yeah. People are always like, when I say that, they're like, is she Irish? I'm like, nope, she's German. So yeah, we met there, just a mutual friend that we both happened to be friends with. So we just all went out one night and started chatting with her and ended up getting married
Congrats.
eventually. Mhm.
I would... that eventually there was funny enough. I love. I have to make a German joke now.
Okay.
There is a. There is most probably she knows when she will hear this, but there is a lot of Denglish happening in Germany. Like there are a lot of combinations of words that they think that they mean the same in English as they mean in German.
I'll
And
ask her.
One of them is eventually.
Eventually.
Because in German, eventuell means maybe. And in English, eventually means it happened.
Yeah. Or will happen, or yeah.
Or
Exactly.
will happen, yeah.
Mhm.
But it's not a maybe. And trust me, it can lead to some funny discussions.
All right. I'll try using that sometime on her and be like, no,
And
I wasn't talking about eventually. I was talking about maybe. Come on, you're German. You
exactly.
should know.
Yeah. And the famous, but I'm pretty sure you know it, the famous joke that I learned here with the English submarine sending an SOS during the Second World War. Do you know it?
No, I don't think so.
Um, they are sending an SOS signal. SOS, save us, we are sinking. And the German submarine is answering, okay, what are you thinking about?
I'm so gonna use that. I'm gonna go say that joke actually after we're done with this. I'm gonna go out and be like, I have a joke for you.
uh, I love my friends from here because they know both the best jokes. We had a book in which we were writing the English words, and oh my god, it's so funny. It's so funny. I'm not. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm also a learner in German. I'm not a native in English as well, so but still, it's funny to see the differences.
Yeah.
Like,
How's your German? Pretty all right? Can you get around?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm fluent.
Yeah.
I'm here since 10 years. This year, beginning was hard because I was less in Germany. I was a lot in business trips
Right.
in English-speaking countries. So, and you think you are here actually since 3-4 years, but at the end you are here a few months in those 3-4 years, and
Oh,
maybe the weekends, uh, and then everyone is expecting like you're here since 3 years, yeah, but
yeah.
not here much, but no, I'm okay.
You're
It's
good.
not an easy language, but I would call it an engineering language, um, because the huge difference between German and any other language that I can understand at least is that they have a small package of words, and if you know them, the rest is just combining those words and making even longer ones.
I always make fun of the German language for that. It's like their words are just a couple words combined together into a longer
Absolutely.
word.
Sometimes at
Totally.
work, I'm just asking, okay, I write this together or separate? Pick it.
Yeah. Does better.
Like,
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Yeah, anyhow, there were more words than one.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's an engineering language because if you know the words, you just combine them and then you change. It's a mathematical thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't mind speaking it, but since we don't, I mean, I maybe go there once a year or once every other year to visit her family and stuff, and their English is pretty good. So it's like you, if you're not, even though you're not there, it's hard to learn the language. And so that's why I haven't been able to learn it properly.
Absolutely. And how is London in comparison with Dublin, Milo?
Oh, it's much bigger, much bigger. It's so densely populated. And like Dublin, oddly, the downtown area, central area of Dublin, you can just walk around so easily and get from one place to the other. Here, you've got to take the tube or the bus or something like that. No matter where you're going in London, it's going to take you about 45 minutes to get there. It just takes forever to get places because it's so massive and so full of people. That's the biggest one.
It's more multicultural than Dublin. Dublin.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. Dublin, interestingly, is very multicultural city,
Mm-hmm.
especially because they've got so many tech companies there that they have workers for. And then once
They
you,
have lower taxes.
yeah, exactly. That's why they have so many tech companies there. They don't charge them taxes. Like, well, no, we don't want your money. What do we need that for? Build housing for all the people that actually live here? Nah. Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
yeah, no, you're right. Totally true. And then, yeah, so that's the big one. But yeah, London is very multicultural. There's so many people in so many areas with different ethnic groups and stuff. Like the area we live in, there's a lot of Lebanese restaurants and stuff. So it's very Lebanese culture where we're in. You go down the road a little bit, you might see large, Jewish influence. Down the road, you'll see something else. Like that's the big one with London. I think you're right.
don't you enjoy the fact that, or nah, that sounded really negative and I didn't meant it like this, but I always love the fact, like, I live in a small city in Germany, which makes um, for example, the restaurant offer not so diverse because usually you have German food, you have some Italian food from some Italian guest workers which are left here, which will remain here from the 60s and 70s. You have some Turkish food, and that's about it. Like every once in a while, you have some Indian, some Asian, but they are not really authentic. And I do love these communities, like you said, the Lebanese community in London, where you actually have the literal actual food from there, like the authentic food. Isn't it something that you learn to appreciate after a while of living in these multicultural communities?
Oh yeah, I love different kinds of food. What did I ask you before when we talked? Where do you live in Germany?
I live in the south, close to Stuttgart.
You know Limburger Hof?
No.
Oh, okay, because that's where my wife is from. It's kind of so if you go into Frankfurt, it's about a
Mm-hmm.
south, kind of about an hour southwest of
Give me a big
Frankfurt.
city.
Bigger than Limburgerhof? I don't know. But I've heard of where you're from, so I kind of have a feeling maybe it's not too far away.
Yeah, I think because Frankfurt, it's actually so normally 1 hour south of Frankfurt is somewhere like Heidelberg, Waldorf.
Heidelberg is probably closest. Yeah,
And now you made me curious.
I know. I'm
Limburger
pulling up a
Hof?
map as well. Like we should be talking about this stuff, and instead we're looking at map.
Limburger.
Yeah, don't ask me how to spell it. Limburgerhof.
Yeah, I found it. Ludwigshafen. Oh, okay, it's a bit more to the south.
Okay, yeah, it's very south.
It's part of Ludwigshafen. That's an so nice story, but most probably you know them from your wife. Mannheim,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which is the next city close to Ludwigshafen, was completely smashed in the Second World War, and it's the most American German city that exists.
Oh,
Like
wow.
even the way in which they build it, like you have the streets number. You don't have names on the streets; you have numbers on the
Mm.
streets, like the seventh, the eighth, like. And Ludwigshafen, it's a city which is part of a German joke culture because they said there is possibly not an uglier city in Germany than
Yeah, well, because
Ludwigshafen.
it's like they did chemical plants there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
what she told me. Yeah. So yeah, we basically drive through Mannheim and Ludwigshafen.
So next time we can do this in person
I know. I was
when
just
you
thinking that
visit.
too. That looks like it's about an hour away.
It's not even an hour.
No.
There is in Germany Autobahn.
Oh yes,
Uh,
depending on how you drive.
I drive a lot.
All
I
right.
love, I love it.
Yeah, that is a nice
Okay,
drive. Okay.
yeah. Um, but I was asking you about the food.
Yep.
As I said, here we have most probably most often the same culture because of the history of Germany. But don't you learn to enjoy this offer? Like you can have Lebanese, you can have Chinese, you can have Vietnamese, you can have everything that you want.
Yes, everything except for Mexican. Oddly, there's no, I have, or I shouldn't say, I have yet to find a good Mexican restaurant in London. People always say, oh, try this place. And then I'll go to that place and I'll be like, not quite the same. You've got like the equivalent of what we would call Tex-Mex in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got plenty of Tex-Mex places and you got burrito places and you've got some Mexican themed restaurants, but that's the big one. But like Indian, oh, I love Indian food. And there's so many good places to get good Indian food here.
And the level of detail on Indian food in London, like you can get Punjabi, you can get that amount, you
Everything.
can get everything that you want. Milo, I'm sorry, I was laughing before when you said, but not Mexican, because man, I don't know if it was always there, but that was the German in you. I don't know if you know you knew you have it because that art style of complaining
Mm.
It was the perfect German. Like, no, but they don't have Mexican.
It's great, except for this one thing.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Uh, how do how do you see US now after living outside the US, Milo?
It's funny because, of course, you get so much of the news, and the news is just sensationalized so much. And then you go and visit, and it's not like what you expect because of the news. That's the big one. Like, so my friends that I visit are still the same people, and my family, that kind of stuff. And, you don't walk down the road and people aren't running around shooting things with guns and like all the crazy stuff that you see. Um, but I'm from Washington State, which is kind of in the northwest corner of the country. So maybe that's why. Um, One big one I have noticed with Seattle is how much Seattle has changed. It used to be a very hip city. Like they had a lot of good music clubs. Like that's where Nirvana is from, for
Hmm.
example. Amazon moved in and built their corporate offices in downtown Seattle. And so they kind of destroyed the city. And now it's just a tech hub. And they've made it so expensive to live that there's a huge homeless problem there now. And then on top of that, all the apartments are owned by corporations that basically price fix all their rents. So they all work together to make the rents higher than they need to be. So you'll cruise down the road and you'll see apartment buildings that have for rent signs, but then you go to talk to them about, and the rates are just super high, or they're super difficult to get into, that kind of stuff. And so that one really bothers me is the corporization of Seattle compared to the cool place that it used to be. But if you get out of that, it's still a lot of the same. Like the Cascade Mountains around there are still beautiful. The Puget Sound, it's still got the country as a whole still has all the national parks that they're so famous for, and different places to visit and stuff. So yeah,
This I don't know if I'm able to say that word, but this corporization that you mentioned, it's happening everywhere.
yeah,
Like this thirst of growing of every possible company in this world is something that I'm not able to understand anymore. Um, this hunger of eating everything around us, destroying everything. Like you said, Amazon moved in the city in the downtown Seattle, and you destroy a city known for his music since years. I mean, it's unbelievable, but it's happening everywhere, and it's this
no, it's true. Like
eager.
we talked about Dublin, it's that way. Like all the big tech companies that have moved in there because of the tax discounts, and they're just building these big office buildings and making it impossible for people just to live in a lot of ways, which sucks.
London was the same when they became the banking hub of Europe. Uh, of course, now they lost a bit because of the Brexit, but it was the same. And every center that has, and every, it's, I keep saying it's overpriced, but I do say it's overpriced not because I think it's overpriced because I think that if we talk about the actual building itself, it's if we talk about the house that you want to buy, if you want to buy an apartment, it doesn't worth that money. So I'm keep saying if I pay half of million euros for a 3 rooms apartment in a city, but sorry, I can get a house in Florida for that money and live by the beach, not so far away,
Yeah.
or a villa in Spain, and the quality of life is much different for sure.
Yeah, I would much have a more relaxed quality of life. And the thing is, like, yeah, prices of everything go up, but you can look this up. I mean, the wages, people's salaries are slowly going up, right? While the prices of just living, rents, cost of goods, food are skyrocketing. So there's no, it should be
There's no match.
no, exactly. It
There's
should
no
be
match.
similar. Yeah. But
I did said in one of the previous episodes that I had with Rene that friends gave us a bad example when some young guys could afford to live in downtown New York, or I don't know, somewhere in the good area of New York. I think in Chelsea they were there. I don't remember exactly. Uh, and working normal jobs, because that's something which I don't think that was possible back then, or not so easy, but now it's impossible, absolutely.
Yeah. In Chelsea, yeah, exactly. To my understanding, it used to be, yeah, a more affordable area, maybe a bit rougher, but you could live there. And now it's kind of a gentrified, posh neighborhood, and people want to be like, oh, I live in Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned about shooting, and that's such a nice thing, because I've seen last week, I think, was uh I have a problem with names now. Um, Marjorie Taylor Greene, was it's her name? A Republican
Oh,
politician.
yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Taylor Greene,
Yeah.
and she was talking to a BBC reporter, correspondent. Have you seen it? And when she said, "Yeah, you
No, but
should
I
go
just
home
imagine
because,"
it's something ridiculously stupid. They need to have an.
and it's exactly like you
Oh.
said, like if this this headlining of news, it's so stupid. We create idiots.
Hmm.
Like, she told a BBC reporter, because she was asking her something like really serious question. I don't remember the question. Said, "Yeah, you should go home because if you go home, your if you are not home, your daughter is being raped by immigrants."
She's an idiot. They need they need to have some form of test that you should have to pass in order to be an elected official in that country. But I mean, it used to be the voters actually filtered these people out. But now they're like, oh, I'm an idiot, so I'm going to vote for an idiot because they're like me. Um, yeah, that woman's a moron, and she's an embarrassment to my country.
It's unbelievable how she got there, but there is one of this in every country. Trust me, there is one of this.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed the far right uh, political party in Germany did pretty well in the last election. Uh, uh, yeah, you're right. It is happening everywhere. Luckily, you guys aren't as bad as the U.S. is. Uh,
No, the if you look about the presence, the voting where AFD didn't get that many votes, was 84%, Milo. That's insane for every democracy. That should be the normal. It's not, but 84% is crazy. But also the hypocrisy of this party in Germany, of AfD, where they are against immigration and against homosexuals, and their leader is a homosexual living with an immigrant from Sri Lanka, being
what?
married with her and living in Switzerland.
So the party that is against all this stuff, their leader is everything that they're against. This is proof that the world as a whole, people are getting dumber. By the way,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, I'm asking you, how do you see US? Because I think as long as we are not leaving our home country, we have a subjective opinion. Like you said, we are reading the news about the other countries, and we think, yeah, that cannot be good because that's a shit, because that I don't like that one, because I don't know, they have a problem with immigrants and so on. Um, do you see a um, change in your opinion about your country, about your home country, since you live outside US?
Not, I don't think, I mean, that's a valid question to see how it would have changed. Um, I, I don't think so. Oddly, I probably feel like I have to defend my country more. So, like before living out of the US, if say like I traveled somewhere, was talking to somebody, and they're like, America, this or that, or, whatever, I'd be like, okay, sure, whatever. But now I kind of feel like people have this idea of my country, and now I feel like I have to defend it and say, look, it's not that bad. Yes, you've got these nutcases like Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff that are getting into the office, or the current president. Let's just, leave that one hanging
His
there.
name should not be mentioned.
Exactly. So yes, there is that happening there. So I can't defend any of that or all the like mass shootings and stuff, but not everybody in the country is like that. And I have to explain it like it's a big country. So that'd be like saying everybody in California, like comparing it to Europe, right? So that'd be like saying everybody in Spain is exactly the same as everybody in Germany, right? They're not. It's culturally, very different. And the US is the same way. People in Louisiana are going to be very different from people in California, for example, right? And so I kind of have to explain that to people. So it's not that my opinion of my country has changed. I just find myself constantly having to explain my country, which I
Mm-hmm.
find annoying. And I get really annoyed when people bring up politics because it's like, don't blame me for the politics of the country I'm from, like, so I find that is the big one of not living there is that I have to defend it or explain it or justify it, to where I'd prefer not to. But my opinion has probably stayed about the same. Yeah.
There are a lot of videos happening online with people from US being asked about what's the capital of Germany, what's the capital of France. And I find it so unfair. I visit the US work-wise a few times, but I also did I think some two private trips. One of them actually an East Coast road trip from New York until Miami down and back. And I realize how ignorant we are in Europe, considering the fact that those Americans, they don't even know what's the capital of France. They mistaken Paris with the country, but we have no idea which state is between North Carolina and Florida, and it's not even complicated. And and it's I feel so bad now trying to explain it, and I I'm a US fanboy. I must say that I'm not a band fanboy. I'm a US fanboy. Maybe because of the cliches that I've seen in the movies. Maybe because of all the things which I dreamed of being a small kid or being a kid watching movies. But I have the feeling I need to defend and to give it back with the same ignorance and say, if you don't know which is the capital of which state is Atlanta, then you should not pretend that they should know which is the capital city of Germany, because the same measure nobody grasps the size of US from Europe, Milo. That's somehow the thing which I'm realizing more and more.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I get the same thing. People are like, people in America don't know this. And then just turn it around and ask that person the same question. Okay, you want somebody from the US to name the capital of this place, then you need to name the capital of that place in response. It's the same with politics. People will be like, the president and this and that and that. And like, well, who's the prime minister of the country you currently live in? And they'll be like, I don't know. Like that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Just to realize that you live that you are in a country which has, I think, 4 different time zones, 5, 5 different time. 4.
Well,
okay,
5
4.
If you count like Hawaii and
exactly. But I would say that's a bit far-fetched because considering Hawaii a U.S. state,
yeah, yeah,
I'm not politically incorrect. I don't want to say anything, but that's a bit far-fetched.
Yeah.
Like that's 6 hours of a flight from the coast.
It's a great state. It's fun to visit.
Absolutely.
Fun to
Absolutely.
visit. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not questioning that. But I just want to say I had in one of the episodes I had someone from Colorado, and she wrote me the email because when we discussed about when was the time that we can meet, and she said I'm mountain time, and I was
you had to look it up.
Google what is mountain time, because you have no idea, and that's why I think we should see each other's weaknesses and or see our own weaknesses because before we talk about the others. And I think there's something that you mean as well by defending the country.
Yeah. And it'd be nice if I didn't feel I had to do that and stuff. And in some of those people, I mean, let's be honest, some Americans are total dumbasses and they are
But they are
an
everywhere,
embarrassment.
right?
But yeah, that's the thing. They're everywhere. I could walk down the street here in London and meet the same kind of people. Yeah.
There is a Romanian saying which says that every forest has its dry trees. And
That's a good saying.
that's that's absolutely the same everywhere.
Yeah. I've got a bunch from this. I've got every forest there's dry trees and a joke about submarines and SOSs.
I'm happy that I can increase your knowledge.
That's great. Totally worth it. Totally worth it.
What would you advise to someone that would consider moving abroad, Milo?
If you can do it, do it. The two things with that: one is it's not as easy as you think it's going to be. People ask me all the time. They're like, "I want to move. What do I need to do?" And I'll be like, "Get a job that'll do it for you." Because if you're trying to do it yourself, you're going to pull your hair out. Or just get a bunch of no's. It is really because most countries are very anti-immigration, unfortunately. So that's the first one. But then the other one, if you have that opportunity, absolutely do it. And this is what I tell people. Maybe you move and you realize you don't like it. Well, that's fine. Give it however much amount of time, a year, I say, and then move back, right? You can always go back to wherever it is you're from. It's not like there's some rule that says once you move out of a city, you can't ever move back to it. So that's my response, because maybe you'll get there, you'll love it, you want to stay longer, or you meet cool people, or you have fun adventures, and then you go back, or you stay permanently, or whatever. Or even if you go back and you hate it, then you'll know, right? Versus not doing it and then wondering like, oh man, I wonder what would have happened if I had actually moved. So always do it. Doesn't matter where, do it.
Important piece of advice: cut it in small slices, and don't take decisions for 10 years, for 20 years. Just think about 6 months, think about 1 year, depending on the distance, of course. But think about a reasonable amount of time when you say, okay, I will decide, and then that's something which I get from almost everyone. This is the premise that I came in Germany with as well. Mm-hmm. Back then, I talked to my wife, and I said, if we go for 1 year and we see if you like it, or if we like it or not, and that's it.
Yeah, then you go back. Yeah. And here you are. You're still there.
10 years later, we are 3.
Yeah. So, perfect.
During your expat time, I do guess, again, if my information is correct, you started your hobby project, the 80s and 90s Overlooked.
Yes. So there's the 80s and 90s Overlooked, but also 80s and 90s Uncensored. So Overlooked is the YouTube channel, and Uncensored is the podcast. So basically, in 2020, early 2020, during COVID, I write a lot. I've got a lot of content writing, and a friend of mine, Jamie, was setting up a website called just the 80s and 90s.com, where he was going to do a bunch of pop culture and nostalgia content. And he's like, hey, do you want to contribute to this? And I'm like, well, no, I don't really want to. Don't know. I'm kind of got enough going on. But how about we do a podcast instead? And then he was like, well, what's a podcast? And then I said, well, this is what a podcast is. And so that's where we came up with the 80s and 90s Uncensored, which was just a podcast about those two glorious decades of, if it happened then, it's open for discussion. And we'll do fun stuff, pop culture, movies, we'll do serious subjects. Yeah, we do one episode every week. And we've done one episode a week since we started doing it. So for over 4 years now, going on our 5th. And then we also have the YouTube channel, which is the 80s and 90s Overlooked. That's more movies focused. So that's around like finding old movies that maybe are overlooked for a reason or not. And so we'll watch them and talk about those. And then we also do other content on there as well. So Jamie did a video about like our heroes that are bad influences, like Morbius from The Matrix, how he's actually not a very good mentor, right? If you think about it, because he doesn't really give Neo all the information before he takes the pill. And then he wakes up in this dystopian world that sucks ass. And it's like, you can't take it back at that point. It's already been done. That kind of stuff, to where like these TV mentors are supposed to be our heroes, but they're actually not, our movie mentors. So we'll do a little bit of that kind of stuff on Overlooked as well.
What do you think that is getting people to talk a lot about those periods like 80s, 90s? Do you think it's the content, or do you think it's the nostalgia for youth?
I think it's the nostalgia, yeah, for youth, especially with our audience that will look back and be like, oh, yeah, I remember grunge. I remember wearing flannel shirts and torn jeans. So I think as we get older, we often look at our youth as like, oh, this great time. We were energetic. We were enthusiastic about the world. We weren't bitter and beat down from our life and our jobs. So there's that. For our younger audience, it's a bit of just kind of, oh, look at that. That's kind of funny. What VHS tapes? What's a VHS tape? Kind of thing. But yeah, I think nostalgia is popular, and it doesn't matter what era. Like, our parents were probably like talking about how great the 60s and 50s were, or whatever. I don't know how old your parents are, but or maybe not, because they're in Romania. So maybe they were like, man, you had it lucky with your hour and a half of TV. When
No,
I
no.
was a kid, we only had 30 minutes of radio. We didn't even have TV.
Fun fact: they actually had it.
Oh,
So there was a bad change in the communist regime somewhere at the end of the 70s, at the beginning of the 80s, and our leader had a visit in China or in North Korea, I don't remember, and he came impressed back. I said, I want to do that. I want to have that as well. That personality cult that was happening in those countries, and then he got rejected by US, because US was planned to give Romania the favorized country clause, something I don't know if there is a high distinction, and he didn't get it. And then he decided to cut the ties with the International Monetary Fund and to pay the debt, and that's why the country went completely in the head.
that sucks.
Yeah.
Now it's a tourist destination for people who want to see Dracula stuffed edibles, right?
Yeah, I'm actually doing it together with my wife for a work colleague of mine from here, because she said she wants to go with her husband. And I realized with my wife during this research of our own country that it became touristic, and there are a lot of accommodation options that were not there in the past, and you have a lot of things that you can do. And we said, maybe we do something in the summer as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Go tour around and see like how the tourists
You speak the language. It's easy.
Exactly. Yeah. You'll get better service at the restaurants.
Or not.
Or worse. Yeah.
How do you see the 80s, 90s culture in UK and Ireland? Did you get a grasp of it? Have you seen some stores that are themed?
Yeah. Well, in Ireland, it certainly would have been heavily influenced by the troubles, the war within Northern Ireland and bombings and that kind of stuff, probably.
Okay.
Even though Southern Ireland wouldn't have been as affected by it, they still would have been aware of it. The UK had a big influence on the US then. So the British invasion bands, for example, punk rock music from the 80s into the 90s with Oasis and that kind of stuff. So I think music-wise, the UK definitely had a big influence on the US. Those were probably big areas that I've seen from what I can tell.
Mhm. Maybe it's a time. It's about time to share what we plan to do in the next one, Milo, because most probably a lot of people already figured it out. But I think it's nice to make it as a story. So originally, when we got in contact, we discussed about an 80-90 episode, and we didn't knew in which direction. Then I realized that Milo is also an expat, so he actually told me, and that's why I said, okay, I think it's important to explore his expat story, even though coming as a U.S. citizen to UK and Ireland is not that much of an expat story. You basically come home.
Yeah.
Um, and we thought, okay, we come from two different cultures, like completely different. We realized only by going to small details, and we decided to do an episode comparing the 80s and the 90s lived in Romania with the 80s and the 90s lived in the United States. And that will be a fun one.
Yeah, that should be interesting. It'll be interesting to see the comparison, especially for me. It'll be fun to hear about Romania then, or maybe not fun, but informative. And I really want to know like how my perception and like what I imagine it being like is versus the reality. That I think is going to be fascinating.
Absolutely. I mean, what happened in the US, we all know because we've seen it in the movies.
Yeah.
I have to say this, I was shocked 2017 in my first visit in US when I've realized that the school buses from the movies are actually there still today in the same shape and color and form and with the same uh, puller in which you get the stop sign out to stop the cars. That was a heartwarming moment for me.
Yep. And no seatbelts. Still no seatbelts on the school buses.
What?
Yeah. School buses are totally unsafe. Like, yeah, like everywhere else,
What?
you gotta like, yeah, they're very particular about safety, kids and stuff like that. The kids have to sit in their seats, but they don't have seatbelts. No.
I didn't do that. That's funny.
Yep.
Milo, before we wrap it up, I have a set of rapid fire questions
Mhm.
that I usually plan according to my guest. Favorite overlooked 80s or 90s movie?
Favorite overlooked 80s or 90s movie? Space, what was it called? Space something. I can't think of what it's actually called. All right. So the movie I was thinking of is Space Trucker.
I will leave this break in.
There you go. Space Truckers came out in 1996.
Okay, I haven't seen it. I will check
Check
it
it out. It's ridiculous. And it has Norm from Cheers on it. It has Square Pigs. It has
Minecraft.
kind of, yeah, I think that's where Minecraft got the idea from.
Okay, interesting. Last book you read?
The
You
last
read?
book I've been reading, I just read a book called. Did you send me that you were going to ask me these questions?
No.
Okay, good, because I didn't want to be like I should have known the answers to this.
No. And that if you have too much preparation, that they are not rapid fire questions anymore.
Oh, okay. Or unless you're me and you're like, I don't remember. What was the last book I read? It's funny enough, like I read quite a bit, and I think that's part of the problem. But
because you mix up titles and authors.
Yeah. So I can't think of the name of the last one that I read, but the one I'm currently reading is a biography of David Lynch. And I'm almost done with that because I think he's fascinating. He was a director. He just died a few months ago. And so I started reading a biography of him. So that's what I'm currently reading. Why can't I think of the name of the last book I read?
That's okay. That's enough. It's okay. Um, Guinness or American craft beer?
American craft beer. I'm not a Guinness drinker. Though it is true what they say, the Guinness is better the closer you get to the Guinness distillery. Like if you
It
have
has
it,
to be fresh.
yeah, if you have it from the distillery, it's the best. The farther away, the worse it gets. But I like my microbrews and my craft beers. So gotta go American craft beers on that.
Nintendo or Sega?
Sega. We did
That was a straight.
oh yeah, we did an episode on this for the podcast where we pitted Nintendo, the N64 versus versus the PlayStation versus the Sega, and yeah, so PlayStation number one, Sega, then Nintendo.
What's something you miss the most about US?
Mexican food,
You said it already.
yeah,
True.
Cheez-It crackers, little square
How
cheese
how
flavored crackers. They're delicious.
how upset would be your president now when you say that the only thing that you miss from US is Mexican food?
He'd probably be very upset. Maybe this will get back to him. Yeah. That Milo Denison guy.
Pen and paper or typing when writing ideas?
Typing. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible writer. Even I can't read my handwriting. And so it's got to be typing.
If you could live inside one of the 80s or 90s show sitcom for a week, what would it be?
If I could be inside of one of them.
Yeah.
Ooh. That's good. What would be a fun one? Well, I do like Magnum PI, and it would be awesome to cruise around in a Ferrari. So as long as I don't get shot in that show, there's that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dream podcast guest.
Oh,
Dead
wait,
or
Star
alive?
Trek The Next Generation came out in the 90s.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
Easy.
I'm at the edge. I love Stargate as well as G1. Most probably you know it.
Yep.
But Next Generation is my love of my life.
It's the number one. Yeah.
I have managed to make my wife discover Star Trek Next Generation now, and she binge watch it on Netflix.
Ah, nice. Good job. Good job. Everyone deserves the pleasure of watching that show. It's so great. And
Engage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Engage.
Yeah. Captain Picard and Patrick Stewart are the father that we all wanted. But even though he was didn't like children, I still want him to be my father.
That was
Jean-Luc Picard.
That was a nice impression of his voice. I liked it. He had a saying, which I don't remember it. I will remember it for sure after.
I did remember the last book I read while we were sitting here.
Please.
It's called The Ask, and it's by a guy named Sam Lipsty or something like that. And the reason I read it is the main character in the book is named Milo, so we share the same name. And it's basically a story about a guy gets fired from his job. A friend of him asks him, hence the name, to do some work for him, and then he just kind of wanders around town being a total dumbass and bitching and complaining all the time. I didn't give it a good rating, by the way. Like if I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend it, but the main character's name is Milo, so that's why I read it.
Fair enough reason to read it. Makes sense. Dream podcast guest, dead or alive?
I just thought of this the other day, and it stands true still. It'd have to be Michael J. Fox. Especially because he was such an icon of the 1980s and 90s with his movies and shows, and the obstacles that he's gone through with his illness and stuff like that. And he's just super interesting, and I'm such a fan of his. As a kid, he was my idol. And so 80s and 90s, he's got to be number one on the list.
Nice. Makes sense. Nice story. The quote from Picard was, "Make it so."
Make it so. Make it so.
And the most important question, the question which is separating the goods from the bad. Sweet popcorn or salty?
Salty. 100%. Yep. No question.
There is no discussion.
Yeah.
You should ask your wife.
I should actually. I wonder what she. I think she likes salty as well. Like when we go to the movies and get popcorn, yeah, we usually just get salty, and I don't think it's because that's what I prefer.
I don't think she's from Germany.
She might not be. Maybe she's lived away too long.
Or undercover or something. You
Yeah.
should investigate on that.
I should.
Milo, it was a fun discussion. I loved it.
Mhm.
Thanks for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to the discussion about the 80s, 90s cultural Romanian American shock.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, that should be fun as well. So yeah, this was great. This was a lot of fun. So and yeah, those questions got me thinking to actually remember books that I read. It's like read gone.
Thanks for your time. Do appreciate the time. It was a pleasure for me. It was a lot of fun. And see you next time.
All right, talk to you then.
For sure. Talk to you
Absolutely.
then.
All right.
Bye.